Hi, I'm Dr. Sherwana Davis, a psychotherapist, here to provide you with the review of Capote versus the Swans, episode 5. And this series is absolutely amazing to watch. As always, it is full of entertainment and some life lessons as well. In this episode, if I were to sum it up, I would use three words. It would be resurrection, righteousness, and revenge. They were all on display in this episode. Now, the episode starts off with Capote really feeling a lot of self pity, self loathing associated with what happened regarding this isolation that he is experiencing from the Swans. And as a result of that feeling that he's having, he doesn't want to be alive anymore. And he makes an attempt to no longer be alive in this episode. And of course, it doesn't work out for him. That's where the resurrection begins. And the resurrection begins with James Baldwin. And if you don't know James Baldwin, please, please, please research him. He is probably, if I think about my top 5 authors of like all time, he is on that list. He is extraordinary. And the fact that this episode included James Baldwin, I was in on it the entire episode. It was just wonderful just to see a depiction of him. And of course, it made me want his a series just for James Baldwin, of course. But back to this episode, he was there to basically resurrect Capote in this episode, literally, right? And so what he did was he really called him out. And he wanted him to no longer be isolated and feel separated from the society that he's been a part of. He was there to help him reclaim his place in life and as a literary giant. So they literally go inside of the restaurant that Capote had been going to with the Swans. And inside of that restaurant, I mean, just the dialogue between them was just extraordinary to watch and to just listen to. It really provided an opportunity to dissect this entire Swan group and what it meant and what it symbolized as a result of his interaction with them. And we saw them discuss really two key things that, as we are just watching it for drama, we didn't expect it to get really, really serious and really start picking things apart, but it did. And I loved it. And the two things that it picked apart as it relates to the Swans is they're not so perfect. There is a lot of privilege and hierarchy in that group, right? And so Capote was able to start talking and dissecting all of the different layers of what that Swan group was about. And it was prompted by a pivotal question that Baldwin asked him, which was, what didn't you write? What did you leave out of what you wrote, right? And so he begins, Capote does, to really spill the tea, right, on what happened with this group. And so he talks about the hierarchy, how Black people are laborers, and this group uses gay men for entertainment purposes. And it really starts talking about their privilege in the society and how this privilege really shields them from being interesting and being a real part of society. And so that whole discussion and dialogue, it left me wanting, this whole particular episode, I think could just be a one act play, right? It was just so amazing to hear, to watch just by itself. The other part of this, if you know anything about James Baldwin, he was a social critic, a political critic, right? And so he would have also, I think, in real life, would have probably challenged Capote about his own privilege in this group, right? And how he fit into all of this. But it was just that dialogue and that exchange where they really start to really dissect what it meant to be in one group of people, of these women coming together. It was fascinating to hear that dialogue of that group of women. The other part is Capote actually challenged them as mothers, right? He said that, they, particularly Babe, was not necessarily a good mother. And so he really, really went in on all of the things surrounding this circle of swans and how they're not so perfect, that everything is not as it appears. And so that was interesting and fascinating to watch. Now, the next part of this, I call it the righteousness moment. And this is where Baldwin actually challenges Capote to actually dismantle that hierarchy and the privilege that he had talked about previously, that Capote had talked about. And so that makes Capote feel like, maybe he is on a journey of this noble journey of really dismantling all of that privilege, all of that hierarchy that exists within this group of swans and high society. And so that was really amazing to watch how his whole demeanor changed when he felt like he had a mission. And then one of the phrases, like Baldwin said, you're doing a duty to the country almost, right? To be able to dismantle this privilege and this group of people of high society. So that was amazing just to see Capote really start feeling alive again. And then the last part of the episode, I call it the revenge part of it. Baldwin, before he leaves and departs back to France, he leaves Capote with a story about how the queen can consume a swan. And so he leaves him with that story. And we see Capote, he is really writing and he's writing, and the writer's block is gone, and he's on this noble mission and he feels really empowered. And we see this last scene where literally he consumes a swan. And it reminds me of that old quote that revenge is a dish best served cold, right? And so when I saw that, that just reminded me of that quote, that he is really resurrecting his life, his writing skills, his ability, and here's this dish. And he is really taking charge of his life and getting revenge on the swans. Let me know what you thought about this episode and what your comments are. I'd be interested to know what you thought.